Hello and welcome to week 5 of PSY262 Positive Psychology, the Science of Well-Being. I am really excited about this week's module. It's absolutely one of my favorite topics. Knowing and being able to use your character strengths are really impactful. We'll talk about that a little bit. It's really fun. It's really interesting. You get to think a lot about yourself and then how to kind of think about other people with a new kind of language. So let's hop into this. This is this is a picture of me with the Character Strengths and Virtues book. I just wanted to show you how big it is because this whole project came about when the group of social scientists and positive psychologists that you heard about in a couple of the videos decided to look at what's right with humans as opposed to the diagnostic medical manual that outlines all the things that are wrong with us, which is also a really huge book. And so it was good to know that there's enough stuff that's good about us to make a really big book. So what we're going to talk about today are what are character strengths. You've heard a little bit about that, so we'll cover that just really briefly. And then a little bit more about what your character strengths are and how to think about the assessment results that you got and what are some of the positive outcomes that come from strengths use, and then how to put those into action. So what is a strength? I think for most of us, when we ask that question, we kind of think of physical strength. So that, we think of football players or boxers or wrestlers or people that physically have a lot of strength. But the way that we're defining it in psychology and positive psychology is that a strength is a capacity for feeling, thinking, and behaving in a way that allows optimal functioning in the pursuit of valued outcomes. And so what I love about this is that it can include feeling or emotional strengths, thinking or cognitive strengths, and the way we act. So kind of how we interact with the outside world. So behavioral strengths. And they're specifically they specifically lead us to optimal functioning for ourselves, but also valued outcomes for both ourselves and other people. So my favorite definition of character strengths is the psychological air that we breathe. So as you think about your specific strengths and think about if you weren't able to use them, it kind of feels like your breath is being taken away from you. I did want to mention this because I think it's really fun and interesting that not too long ago in, I think early or maybe summer of 2021, a TikTok user in England, a lady who is studying psychology, so a psychology student, actually posted this posting that says barely any people know about this, and it's you all may recognize this because it's the University of Pennsylvania Authentic Happiness website that we went to earlier in the course and took some assessments. And she says, my psychology professor told us about this, that this is the road to happiness. And if you can scrunch in there and see, it has 3.4 million views and over 250,000 shares. And Dr. Seligman mentioned recently in a lecture that on the day that this was posted, the Authentic Happiness website actually crashed because so many people were going to find out the key to happiness. And even my teenage daughter, who is 17, who kind of knows about this stuff because I've talked to her about it, she became kind of like the high school positive psychologist because all her friends were asking her about how to take this, and we were helping all of her friends interpret their strengths results. So it's very, very much out there in the world right now, and people are really learning about it, which is fantastic. The assessment that you took is called the VIA Character Survey. So VIA stands for Values in Action, and there's a nonprofit institute called the VIA Institute that makes this assessment available for free to anyone that wants to use it, supports research around character strengths, and so offers a lot of free resources on the website. I think there are 700 pieces of research that are available on the website that have to do with character strengths in some way. But the assessment itself measures our psychological strengths that are universally endorsed. You heard how the classification came about. And when you think about your own specific character strengths, they should be energizing to you and they should feel natural. Being able to use them provides you with a sense of meaning and fulfillment. You really feel like they're core to who you are in terms of your personality and your identity. I like to think of them as kind of ingredients in a recipe. There's 24 of them all together. And so you can just imagine the millions of different combinations of how we all see ourselves and how we put these together and how we use them and which ones come more naturally, which ones are more energizing. But the good news is that they can be learned. So there's research behind each and every one of these 24 strengths that enables you to learn how to use those strengths in your life if that's something that you desire. So when you look at this, if you knew a little bit about strengths before you took the assessment, most people are able to identify, probably most of their top strengths. And I've been using the VIA Character Strengths in the survey for probably 5 or 6 years now, and hundreds of Gateway students and our employees, maybe in the thousands now, have taken it. And because I worked with it so much, number one, I can't take the survey anymore because I know exactly how it works. We talked a little bit when we were looking at research methods about the reliability of self-report. And sometimes we go into these kinds of assessments and say what we would like to be rather than maybe what we truly are. Or what we think other people would want us to be. So hopefully when you took the assessment, you were able to really put in what's true and authentic to you. When I know people pretty well, I can usually guess 3-ish of their top 5. And then a lot of people have a couple that are maybe a little bit of a surprise and kind of interesting to learn. So let's talk about your strengths. So when you got your results from the assessment, you probably did what almost everybody does, which is you got the strengths, the 24 strengths in order. Your 5 to 8 at the top are considered your signature strengths. So you look at those and you're like, yeah, that sounds like me. I mean, it should sound like you because you're the person that put the information in. And then you probably went to the bottom to see what your weaknesses are and kind of laughed like, oh my gosh, I'm, really terrible in that area. But something to keep in mind is that these are all strengths. So this assessment does not measure weaknesses in any way. All of us have all 24. We have the capacity to have all 24 of the strengths. There just are some that are more core to our personality that are more us. So I will share with you. So my top strengths are creativity, curiosity, love, humor, and zest, which for me comes out as enthusiasm. My bottom are self-regulation and prudence. Prudence is kind of like caution, so zest, which is enthusiasm, and prudence tend to not show up in the same person. But I have found that in a work team, I make a really good partner with someone who has prudence. We kind of balance each other out. Self-regulation or self-control is something that I have, and I can use it if I need to, but it's kind of draining to me to follow rules. I'm not really, I'm kind of more of a creative person that likes to forge my own path. So you can think about how all of these different things show up in your life, and how if there are some that are at the bottom, do you really want to be able to strengthen them? But really what this assessment is about is really looking at and building your own strengths. So you have those top 5 to 8 signature strengths. Most people have about 5. Those are the ones that are most you. So you can think about those and think, if I didn't get to use these, then it would be really draining. It would be tiring. You can think probably about a job that you've had in your life that wasn't a great fit for you, and think back on it, and it was likely that you weren't able to use some of your best strengths. I personally had a job in an accounting department, which is very compliance, very rules oriented, kind of keep your head down, look at the spreadsheets, and it was just a terrible fit for me. So, we kind of learn from those things, reflecting on times where we really felt like we weren't ourselves or we weren't able to be our best. And it's probably because you weren't able to bring your best strengths to the table. We all have those lesser strengths at the bottom. Those are the ones that are just not energizing for us. Like I said, prudence for me is something that if I have to think about compliance or regulations, that's very draining for me. And so it's not necessarily something I want to do, but it's something I can do if I need to. Middle strengths are those that you have, but you don't necessarily, I mean, we have all of them, but middle strengths you have a little bit more, but they're just not the key to who you are, the key to your personality. And then phasic strengths are really, really interesting to think about because they're the kind of strengths that you don't necessarily think of yourself as having that as your top strength, but it's kind of in your back pocket if you need it. It's been really interesting to go through the pandemic because some of those strengths that tend to be phasic for most people, like bravery, like forgiveness, some of the things, like some of the ways we had to get through, we had to pull some strengths out that we might not normally use. Kind of research used to show that people's strengths tended not to change, but we've actually seen through the course of the pandemic that they kind of have changed a little bit situationally. So some of the lesser common strengths are forgiveness and bravery, just sort of because they're things that people don't necessarily use in their everyday life, but they are there if we need them. And then finally, thinking about overuse and underuse, I mentioned that if you've ever had a job that you didn't feel comfortable in, or you kind of felt like you really weren't able to bring your whole self, you're probably in a situation where you are underusing or needing to underuse your signature strengths. Overuse, we can have the tendency to go to our comfort zones, and it may not necessarily be appropriate. I have humor in my top strengths, and there's a lot of situations where humor is not appropriate at all. So I could like accidentally or kind of out of anxiousness or awkwardness make a really bad joke and hurt somebody's feelings. So you kind of want to think about being able to use your strengths in the appropriate amounts and ways. So I mentioned that there's a ton of research around the use of character strengths. And so these are some of the really positive outcomes that have been shown when people know what their strengths are, kind of have the language to articulate their strengths and then get to use them in their everyday lives. Happiness increases, depression goes down. You'll recognize a lot of these from the PERMA model. So positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, productivity is kind of around achievement and accomplishment, vitality, like physical energy, and people make better health decisions too when they are able to use their strength. One of the studies that I really like to share, which has a very large N, in research methods, we also learned about a sample population. We're not ever able to do research with an entire population, but we can take a sample, and the more participants in the sample, the better. Like the more valid the outcomes of the research tend to be. So this is a study that had over 10,000 employees in participate in this study, and they were asked, number one, do they know their top strengths? And number two, are they able to use those? So there were groups of employees that did know their top strengths and those that didn't, and those that are aware are almost 10 times more likely to identify as flourishing at work, which is amazing. But even more so, those that were able to use their top strengths so that their careers, their jobs were a really good match for their unique combination of signature strengths, they reported themselves as 18 times more likely to be flourishing at work. So these are really strong outcomes. Um, just to kind of give you an idea for specific outcomes, we all took the life satisfaction assessment. Are you satisfied with your life? These are some strengths that are associated, correlated, not necessarily causally, but correlated with having a higher number, having a higher result in life satisfaction: hope, zest, gratitude, curiosity, and love. Good health. People tend to have high health if they have one of zest, perseverance, hope, or curiosity, or some combination of those. Work satisfaction comes from curiosity, zest, hope, gratitude, and spirituality, which is interesting. But actually, spirituality can really link you to viewing your work as a calling and really finding a lot of meaning in what you get to do. Obvious, this one seems kind of obvious, right? Perseverance contributes to work productivity. And then for academic achievement while you're in school, perseverance really makes sense. But I think it's interesting that love, gratitude, and hope also are most highly correlated with academic achievement. It doesn't mean that if you don't have any of these or any of these 7 game changers that were mentioned in the Science of Character video, really what the Science of Character Strengths is about is for each person to find and embrace and get to use their particular set of strengths. And so don't ever feel like, one strength is better than the other. There just are some that are, through research shown to be associated with particular outcomes. But overall, the strongest outcome is for you to be able to use yours. So I always like to show this. This is a real person's character strength profile. So this person had 8 signature strengths of honesty, leadership, critical judgment, which is critical thinking. So judgment, if anybody got judgment and you sort of think, oh no, it means I'm judgy, it doesn't mean that. It's probably not a very good name. But it's critical thinking, making good decisions, thinking things through. Perseverance, bravery, prudence, fairness, and humor. And I love to show this and have people guess what kind of a role would be a really good fit for somebody with this kind of profile. And it's actually Dr. Gonzalez, who used to be the president of Gateway Community College and is now, that's our gecko. Dr. Gonzalez is now the interim chancellor over all 10 of the Maricopa community colleges. So we kind of exhaled with relief when we saw that his profile is a perfect fit for somebody in that position. So This is actually going to be your activity assignment for this week. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit. It's just a really, really great habit to get into. It's called strength spotting. So it's a way of having the language to be able to give people really, really specific positive feedback. You've all probably had feedback of like, hey, you were awesome, or hey, good job. And that's great to hear. But when someone can give you really specific details, it's really meaningful. And so strength spotting is an exercise of being able to spot strengths in other people. You can apply it to yourself as well. So it really hones your observation skills and kind of gives you a little bit of a flip in your perspective so that you're more likely to notice positive things around you, which overall can contribute to your well-being. But when you use it to interact with other people, it's really, really powerful. So becoming familiar with all the strengths and kind of like, what do they look like? What does it look like when someone's brave? What does it look like when someone's honest, when they're authentic, when they're a good team player, all of the different strengths. And think about the positive outcomes that come from people being able to use each of the different strengths. Think about your own and become really familiar with what your own are and how it looks when you are able to bring those to the table. But for this exercise, you're going to be observing other people. And so when you see someone exercise or demonstrate one of their strengths, let them know. Label the strength, tell them that it was so great to see how kind you were to that student that was lost. They were able to get to their class on time and they were so grateful to you that you stopped and helped them. So labeling it for them and describing the specific use and the outcome of, if it was you that benefited from the person's strength use, then you can express gratitude to them, but you can also thank them for positive outcomes for other people. Like, thank you for stopping to help that student. That was really amazing. So start to think about this, and it's amazing with kids, being able to really highlight kids' strengths over, kind of pointing out their deficits all the time. It's really great when you can give them really good language that helps them really develop their personalities in a positive way. So that's going to be your assignment for this week. So really kind of start practicing that, and then you'll be able to do that for someone that you know and for someone that you don't really know. And we'll take a look at the results from both of those interactions. And that's it from me for this week. As always, come to my office hours on Tuesdays at 5. Or just reach out to me if you have any questions or thoughts or anything, any great thoughts and ideas around character strengths.